Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Up that yawning. It's good to see everybody. Glad you're here for our Bible class as we continue through our study of John. Just got 2 chapters after this. Can you see the finish line?
Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see how far we can stretch this out.
Yeah, how long do you think it's going to take us?
I don't know.
2 months.
I don't know.
Do you think it's going to be 2 years or like?
No, it won't be 2 years to get through 2 chapters.
Okay, a year.
No, not even that.
Okay, 6 months.
How many verses are in? So 21 has 25 verses, 20 has 31. Maybe a month or 2.
Month or 2. Okay, not that we were betting or anything, but there was some wages going around about on when we think it's going to be done. So.
Okay, well now that I know that, I'm going to rush through. I'm going to mess everybody up.
I would win.
We were able to get through verse 5 last week, where we have Pilate's investigation and examination of Jesus, and with his discussion with Jesus, then he goes back and he talks to the Jewish leaders, and they end up throwing something back at him, and he goes back and he talks to Jesus again. 19:1, Pilate therefore took Jesus and scourged him. The soldiers platted a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They put on him a purple robe and said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they smote him with their hands. Pilate therefore went forth again and saith unto them, Behold, I bring forth to you him forth to you, that ye may know that I find no fault in him. Then came Jesus forth wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate saith unto them, Behold the man. We discussed last week how that this is the evil and wrong kind of compromise that we're not supposed to be doing. If you find no fault in him, he's innocent, then why are you doing all of this? Why have you beaten him? Why aren't you just letting him go? And how that this compromise, trying to find a way out, that Pilate's trying to do, only leads to more trouble, because now Pilate's really backed himself into a corner because, well, you can't let him go now, because if you let him go, then he's going to end up complaining, or somebody's going to make mention of the fact, well, here's Pilate, and he put a innocent man that he clearly said was innocent in punishment. So he brings him out hoping that, okay, this will suffice, this will fulfill their bloodlust, if you will, so that they will he will be able to let him go. But then verse 6, when the chief priests therefore and the officers saw him, they cried out, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. So they're not appeased. Their desires have not been met. It's not enough to just beat him physically.
Are the officers Jewish or the Romans?
Well, what did we say back in 17 when they came to arrest Jesus?
Well, we know that there's Romans there.
Right, but there's 2 separate terms.
Okay.
What term was used to describe the Romans?
Cohort.
No.
Band?
A band,
Okay.
and not like the Beatles. Then the other term to describe who was being sent was who? Officers. Officers from the chief priest. So these are Jewish.
Okay. I didn't know if it was the Romans saying it too. Like.
Well, I mean, and it's very possible that, as we know from the other accounts, Matthew in particular, that the chief priest Sanhedrin, they were mingling around through the crowd and getting everybody stirred up. I mean, it's very easy to conceive that, yeah, the Romans would have been saying it too, because, I mean, look at what they're already doing.
Yeah.
Here they are beating him, mocking him, scourging him in this manner. You don't think they want to see a crucifixion? Hey, yeah, we want to show. We'll get in on this too. So yeah, it's very likely that some of them were in it.
Okay.
But this term would be describing Jewish officers.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, good question, good point. So They're crying out, crucify him, crucify him. Pilate saith unto them, take ye him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. So there's innocent, not guilty, verdict number 3. And again, it's hypocritical for him to even be making these kind of statements. How can you say on the one hand he's not guilty and then at the same time say to the crowd, well, okay, you take him and you crucify him? As if that's going to justify you or excuse you from what is about to happen underneath your watch. And even with what Pilate's going to go a step further in doing, it's not recorded. Yeah, it's not recorded here, but what do the other gospel accounts tell us that Pilate does to try to symbolize? Okay, I wash my hands of this, and you just back away. So you're just letting evil people do what they want to do and thinking that you can be cleansed. And that is a very important point for all of us. We cannot try to step back and remove ourselves from the evil and the wickedness that's going on around us and think that we're going to be able to stand before God justified and cleared when we knew that we should have done something, should have said something, and we didn't. And that's a major problem that we're having throughout the religious world. Their mindset is, well, we can just pray about it and Jesus will take care of it when he gets here. That's not what the church is supposed to be here for. We are here for the purpose of standing up against those things, speaking out against those things, being a light, the light in the midst of darkness. Yes, ma'am?
No, I'm just
Okay. All right. We are not here, we're not to be here in a passive role. We are here to be here in an active role. And then the other side of that problem is the fact that you have all these denominational preachers telling people over and over again, well, there's no works that you have to do. There's no responsibility on your part. Well, then okay, I can just sit back, see what's going on, and yeah, that's a shame, that's terrible, it shouldn't be happening. What are you doing about it? That's that situation here with Pilate. Everybody looks at Pilate and is just, man, yeah, he's in a tough spot, but he knew what was the right thing to do and he didn't do it. All right, just look at yourself. Would you want to be a Pilate? No, I would never want to be a Pilate. Then get up and do something. So Pilate, in this situation, he is in fact laying charges against the chief priests and the officers here by his statement of, I find no fault in him. Then he's saying to them, look, your charges have no grounds upon which they stand. Your charges have not stood up underneath investigation. So in reality, we can kind of see why the temperature is rising on both sides, because with Pilate saying to the Sanhedrin and chief priests here, well, I find no fault in him, what is the charge that he's laying at them?
But they're liars.
You're liars.
Publicly.
You are false accusers. And the chief priests know what that means.
Yeah.
If you are caught being a false accuser, what is the punishment under the law? Whatever you were trying to have put on the other person, that punishment gets put on you. So then everything escalates. Then verse 7, they double down on the blasphemy claim. The Jews answered him, we have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God. Now, if it is the case that the Jews have a law, and that law says that he ought to die, then Pilate's claim is correct. Then okay, you don't need to come to me. You handle this. And this accusation that they levy against Jesus here, all right, Jesus did claim this. And at no point in Jesus' work and in his teaching did he ever deny that he made this claim and that he is, in fact, the Son of God. So here are both accusations being made and both being confirmed by Jesus. Yes, I am the King of the Jews. I am the King of Israel. And this accusation of him being the Son of God. Now, it's interesting that at this point, and with this accusation, it stirs something up in Pilate. He made himself the Son of God. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was the more afraid, and went again into the judgment hall, and saith unto Jesus, Whence art thou? But Jesus gave him no answer. Then saith Pilate unto him, Speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee and have power to release thee? Here's an interesting detail throughout this event. Why do you think? In hearing, well, he called himself the Son of God, and then Pilate is not just afraid, more afraid. So that gives it, inclination or implication that we infer he's already working from a position of fear. Now, there's a bigger level of fear once he hears this accusation. And I don't know necessarily that there is a real reason that we can peg down. I'm just opening this up for discussion. So I'm not looking for anything.
Was it Pilate's wife that had a dream about him?
Yep.
So that's why they're suspicious.
Okay. Could be some superstition here. We know the Romans are idolatrous. They have multitudes of little g gods, deities. I mean, for that matter, I don't know necessarily that they looked at the Caesars as being gods themselves, but certainly they had the mindset of the multitude of gods and their involvement with things that were going on.
I think they had to worship them as gods. That was a thing for them at that time.
Okay.
Once the Caesars came around.
Right.
Yeah, that was.
Could it have
Don't
been
they say
a
we have no God but
We have no king.
but Caesar?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
Well, and that's coming from a Jewish mindset too. So they wouldn't look at Caesar as a god because they knew what that kind of idolatry would get them.
could it have been an angel?
Anybody else?
Did Pilate believe that this was the Son of God? Did he have, was it convicting him at that time?
Potentially, because we're going to see another Roman, or we know of another Roman involved in the crucifixion, that as he actually partakes in it, he ends up making a statement and confession, this was the Son of God.
Now, Jesus, in his ministry
Kill it.
and all that, his name would have been big by this time, so it's finally the man who's doing all these miracles is in front of you.
Right?
And it's this, wait, this is him?
Yeah. And that may be one point of clarification that we need to make on this with the questioning that Pilate is doing with Jesus in this situation. Is it really the case that Pilate does not know who Jesus is or what his claims were?
No.
All right. So I got one no. How would you back that up?
Well, whatever is. So we have to take a look at what's going on. He's in charge of overseeing the Jews. Whenever the Jews have an issue, he's going to know about it.
Yeah.
So they're going to be out and amongst everything. There's already been a Roman centurion that's already had situation with Jesus. So it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's not an unknown thing.
Yeah.
And so then how much did Jewish society actually affect his thinking?
Right.
He's a Roman. You talked about gods with a G, little g. But, how much these are ancient people with a God that has been known to do all these miraculous things. Here's a man who's doing miraculous things.
Yeah. So the questioning that Pilate is laying out here, it's not that he's purely ignorant. If anything, it could be a situation of playing dumb to a certain degree, or to just go through the process of asking the questions just so that we can have this trial. But when we are considering, for that matter, Pilate sending Jesus to Herod once he found out that, okay, he was actually within Herod's jurisdiction. And how it was the case that Herod was excited to have Jesus come before him because he had heard all these wonderful things, miraculous things that Jesus had already done, and he was wanting to see a miracle. And even going all the way back to Jesus' birth. Matthew chapter 2, with the wise men coming to see Herod, and Herod questioning them, where are you going? We're going to, we saw the star, so we're going to go see the King of the Jews. Herod pulls in the Sanhedrin. Where's he supposed to be born? They quote from Micah chapter 5. And we have Matthew recording for us that when all these things were happening, the entire city was in an uproar. So again, to Jamie's point, that here is Pilate who's overseeing all of this, and then you have all these different uproars that are happening. He knows what's going on. To then have this accusation being brought up, sure, some of his superstition is probably kicking in. Well, how, if he's the Son of God, then how are we going to kill the Son of God? Do I want to be guilty of killing the Son of God? So on and so forth. But then going over into the truth of who he actually is and what Pilate knows, it's a situation of, well, okay, here is a very serious charge that I need to really take into consideration. That if it's similar to what Caiaphas and other individuals are going to end up saying. Who are you to stand against what God is doing? Who are you to try to come in and to thwart and overrule what God is able to do? Let's go.
Just before she said that she suffered greatly in this dream, he says he knew because of envy that they handed him over, so he knows that he's innocent. But then just before that, in verse 17, Matthew 27:17 says, therefore, when they were gathered together, Pilate said unto them, whom will ye that I release unto you, Barabbas or Jesus, which is called Christ? So he knows he's called Christ, Messiah.
Yeah.
So that's just another, what we're all talking about.
Yeah, just another layer to it.
Yeah.
A lot of different things, a lot of different moving parts as to why you would have this shift in emotion. But then what's interesting is that when he went in and he asked Jesus this question, whence art thou? But then Jesus gave him no answer. Then saith Pilate unto him, speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee and have power to release thee? Look at the shift in emotion going on here. You hear the accusation that he's the Son of God, and that causes you to be afraid. More afraid than you were. Now you go to question him about this point. You get no answer. And then verse 10, he lashes out. wait a minute, you were just afraid because you're hearing that this guy is the Son of God. Now you're not getting an answer and you're wanting to lash out at the Son of God. And look at the accusation that he makes. Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee and power to release thee? Oh, really? You think that you really have this power over the Son of God to be able to do these things?
Would that still be him out of fear?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Trying to get that answer and Jesus won't.
Yeah.
Don't you know? Like, give me an answer.
Yeah.
I need this clarification.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, but Jesus has already talked to Pilate up to this point. And we, just with our discussion that we've had, Pilate knows something to this man, that there is something to this man. There's enough rumor spreading around. There's enough evidence of what his claims are and how he's already confirmed those things. People are talking about his miracles. So it's very similar. This is a very similar situation as to what was going on with the chief priest and the Sanhedrin. Tell us of your disciples and your doctrine. And Jesus' response is, why are you asking me? Go talk to the multitudes. All right, Pilate asks a question. Why do I need to answer that? Evidence is already out there. You know the answer to the question that you're asking. 3 times Pilate has already shown his weakness and his cowardice in his character. And so Jesus knows there's no need to say anything more at this point. You're not going to do anything. But there's a lesson here that there comes a time when God has nothing more to say to us. When we allow weakness to lead us to wickedness, and then people are just wanting and thinking that, well, okay, just let God send another message or another revelation. There comes a point when God just stops talking.
Well, could we correlate that over to the rich man and Lazarus, where it is said, the rich man says, hey, can you send Lazarus back to my 5 brothers? And they'll listen to him, and the answer is no. He didn't listen to everybody else, so
They have Moses and the prophets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And even during the time frame of the prophets, there are several occasions recorded in there where it says that there was no voice from God and there was no prophet in the land because of how bad they had gotten. In between Malachi up to the birth of Christ, which is a span of 400 years, everybody usually rounds it up or down, to at least 400 years, it's 400 years of silence. No prophet, no revelation, no miraculous deeds, until you have John the Immerser show up. So then you're just left with, exactly what Jesus says with Lazarus and the rich man. All you're left with are Moses and the prophets. You want a message from God? You want God to speak to you? That's what you're getting. And either you'll take that and follow that, and if that's not going to be enough for you, then there's nothing else we can do for you. And even in this situation where we have him, the other gospel accounts tell us of Jesus being taken to Herod, and when he was questioned before Herod, Jesus said absolutely nothing to Herod. And part of that is because Herod was a Jew. He's from the line of Esau. He had no reason to talk to him. You know better. And then on top of that, Herod was just a maniacal heathen, even though he was a Jew. But we are looking at this and as to why Jesus would keep quiet. And just we have Pilate becoming hardened through compromise. You're continuously making excuses and trying to find another way out instead of just doing the right thing. Well, there's no more way to be able to reach a person that's like that. But when Pilate makes the accusation, so he does not answer about being the Son of God, but when Pilate makes the statement about, knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee and have power to release thee? Well, Jesus answers that. Because that is a slap to God. Not just to himself personally, as Jesus, this man that's being brought before you in this trial. Now you're making accusation against God. Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. So here's a humbling moment for Pilate. Now, Pilate, you better watch your step here. You are getting yourself into a position similar to that of Nebuchadnezzar in the Old Testament, who thought himself so great, so mighty. God, or I was going there. That's good. No, it's fine. God turned him into an animal. Then you have Herod in the New Testament. God struck him dead. So Pilate, you better think about what you're saying here before you start making these kind of threats. Therefore he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin. So Pilate was in power because God raises and God lowers earthly governments. God had already arranged for Rome to be in power at this time. Daniel chapter 4. Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the great image and all the different kingdoms that were interpreted into that image. So that Pilate is needing to, he's being called into check here by Jesus recognizing and stating to him, look, this is all by design. You being here, with Rome being in charge and the Jews being in submission to Roman power, that's not just by happenstance. That's not by coincidence. It was through God's design. But as he moves forward in his statement, saying, therefore he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin. Pilate is not blameless in this. So we don't need to look at this as though Jesus just setting him to the side and now we're just completely focusing on this other section, this other crowd. No, Pilate's got his weight to bear in all this evil and wickedness that's taking place. But the Jews, Caiaphas, Annas, the Pharisees, with the knowledge that they have and the fact that they have God's commands, have a greater responsibility in what is happening here. Because if it wasn't for the Jews, Pilate and Rome would not even be in this to begin with. But just as we mentioned, it's crazy how that he was afraid just a moment ago when he heard the accusation of the Son of God. But now he thinks he has power over a deity. So just how fast our reasoning can go, our logical line of thinking just go out the window when we let emotions get the better of us. Fear, anger, frustration, the stress of the situation. Pilate knows that all of them are gunning for his life. He knows that he's innocent. He's trying to find a way out. And so even from that standpoint, let's give Pilate a little bit of credit. If Pilate really is trying to find a way out, and not just for himself, but trying to find a way out for Jesus, then what about the statement? Know ye not that I have power to crucify thee and have power to release thee? Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like turning, hey, I'm the boss.
Right.
I'm always like if you would just speak, I could let you go.
Okay.
That's how I've always seen Pilate, and then with our study now, it's like, okay, maybe if I beat him and he looks bloody enough, maybe that's,
Mhm.
they'll let him go. So I see some, quote unquote, doing air quotes, some goodness in Pilate
Yeah.
that doesn't want to do this. But as we're going through, at the same time, he's going to get in major trouble if this doesn't go through.
Yeah.
So now it's like everyone's backed into a corner.
Right.
Pharisees have bore false witness. He's just beat an innocent man. Great. Because he first tried, well, Herod, you deal with it. He's just backed himself into a corner.
Yeah.
Instead of just standing on truth,
Yeah.
integrity.
And he compromised.
Right. This is just another opportunity point for us to make on being careful of reading emotion into what's going on here. I don't really know what his emotion is. Possibility could be one or the other, could potentially be both. And to Jordan's point, it very well could be the case that even though Pilate is going about this the wrong way, he is trying to find a way to get Jesus out of this alive. And that this is that final ditch effort. And that it's almost a plea, like he's begging him, tell me something so that I can let you go. But at the end of it all, it's Jesus is laying out, look, this is happening in accordance with God's will. You ultimately do not have any control in this situation. And that's a difficult place to be put in and to realize that when you're going through something like this, then you just have to come to the conclusion, you know what, I don't have any control.
And Jesus just kind of gave him the, I wouldn't say authority, but the, hey, it's okay.
Yeah. Do what you need to do.
Not-
almost
yeah.
almost say, Judas, what thou doest,
Yep.
do quickly.
Do quickly. And so he doesn't have to compromise anymore if he were trying to get Jesus cleared of the charges and away from this boiling cauldron that's out of control.
Yeah.
Now he can give into it.
Yeah. And, I think that we can see some more of that effort, that this is him, okay, man, help me out. Verse 12, from thenceforth, Pilate sought to release him. So even with that, he's not done. He's not giving up. But the Jews cried out, saying, if thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus forth and sat down in the judgment seat in a place that is called the Pavement, but in the Hebrew, Gabbatha. So as we're going through this, remember the charges. Blasphemy. Then it was treason. Pilate still wants to let him go. So now they're realizing, okay, we cannot get at him by taking shots at Jesus, so who do they then shift their aim? Now it's at him. Now they take aim at Pilate. If you let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar. They blackmail. If you let him go, then we're going to tell Caesar that you let an insurrectionist go. Which is funny, because what are the charges that are laid against Barabbas? He's an insurrectionist. So now Pilate's stuck in between a rock and a hard place. Yeah. Hey. Like the psalmist said, who can stand against envy? these Jews, this might fall into some stereotype and anti-Semitism, but it'll be all right. When it comes to their sneakiness, they are something else. They're no slouch.
It's weird though that.
But it's not just a Jewish thing, it's a human thing. Go ahead.
It's weird though that he's saying to Jesus, "Don't you know I have the power to kill you or release you?"
Yeah.
And then these Jews are coming here and saying, "Don't you know I have the power to kill you, and you have no way to get to Caesar? Like, hey Caesar, you know I can write my own letter. Hey, something happened. They got out of line. I had to do what needed to be done." And it's like you don't think because of that fear that you're put in.
Yeah. So now they have threatened Caesar and Pilate and his position, but not just his position, they're threatening his life. Because Caesar could very easily step in, take him out. And that's not just removing from position, it's Caesar's going to put you down.
Is Nero at the time yet?
Man, I'm not sure.
No, Nero's in 87.
That's just 40 years away.
Paul is pleading to go to Caesar. That's not Nero.
No, yeah. But I can't remember exactly when Nero came into power. It's going to be close, though.
It's like Augustus or Caligula or something.
But what's interesting about this is now Pilate's in a decision, okay, do I let Jesus go and then compromise my own life, my own position, or do I crucify Jesus and save my own skin and save my own position? According to secular history, within 6 years, Pilate was removed from this position. So he lost it anyways. And there's a lesson in that. If you're going to suffer, and if you're going to lose something, well, then you might as well suffer for doing the right thing. And not end up suffering as a coward, a compromiser, and suffering as somebody who put to death an innocent man. If I'm going to be struck down, if I'm going to lose my power, lose my position, lose my job, well, I'm going to lose it in a way that I can go out holding my head up. Yeah. Rather die standing than live on my knees. So all of this has reached its climax, has come to a head now. They're threatening him. Pilate comes back before Jesus one more time, brought forth and sat down the judgment seat in a place that's called the pavement. And then John inserts this in his record, verse 14. And it was the preparation of the Passover, and about the 6th hour. And he saith unto the Jews, Behold your king. But they cried out, away with him, crucify him. Pilate saith unto them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, We have no king but Caesar. Even with the blackmail, goes back, sits down, a place called the pavement, comes back out, and he says to him, Behold your king. But the first section there, verse 14, it was the preparation of the Passover, about the 6th hour. In our John study, we've made mention of the fact that John does a really good job of keeping a chronological record of the events that are transpiring. And what's been one of the key ways that he's done that for us? Passover. Throughout John's record, he gives callback to, well, this was happening at this time of the Passover. And I would argue that that's not just for the purpose of keeping time for us in our study, but it is also a connection to the fact that Jesus is going to be our Passover. And we understand the significance of all these things transpiring and happening at this time of Passover. That just as Israel was in Egypt in bondage, and with the covering of the blood of the Lamb, and the death angel passed over them. Well, now here we're going to have Jesus crucified, the Lamb of God, slain during this Passover week and at the time of Passover, and that for the covering of our sins. So there's no disconnect here from the fact of John bringing this up at this point. Preparation of the Passover, 6th hour. So what specific time are we looking at here? That thing's been biting me up ever since I've been up here. Are we taking guesses? I don't think so. Huh?
Mine says perhaps 6 a.m.
Fourth watch.
What I dug up is noon.
It said perhaps.
Huh? Yeah. Well, this is noon on the preparation day of the Passover. So when's that?
The 6th hour.
When's the preparation day?
Friday.
Friday. Hmm. I don't know. That'd be a good study for everybody. Huh? Well, I would like to. Well, you need to figure out as to who's making the claim that he's doing it by Roman time, because I would argue that with John being a Jew, making reference to a Jewish holiday, he wouldn't be writing by Roman time. And especially if we're going to follow the crucifixion timeline and the record of keeping time and Jesus being raised on the third day, is that kept by Roman time or Jewish time?
It's Jewish time.
Okay, it's Jewish time. And that's something that causes a lot of people consternation as to, was it really 3 days? Because with what we're fixing to go through, he was buried in the evening, would have spent 1 day total in the tomb through the Sabbath, and then raises on the morning of the first day. Well, it's not a full 24 hours. Does it count as a day? If you're going by Jewish time and how they kept time, it is 3 days. So that would be my pushback. That we're not going by Roman time, we're going by Jewish time. And that even as Jesus, after he raises from the dead, and he's talking to the two men on the road, why am I blanking? Emmaus? Arameus. They make the claim. They confirm it. It's the first day of the week. Now is the third day. We expected him to raise from the dead. But as we're considering this and this point that John is making, when here we are on this preparation of the Passover. So when they should be getting ready for this important holy day, what are they busy doing?
Killing people.
Not just killing people, but lying,
Yep.
blackmailing.
False accusation, blackmail, extortion, list just goes on and on and on.
That's also why we're pointing out the Passover, because they should be holy
That's right.
They're going to do their Lord's Supper, sip, dip, leave dip, run
Chip,
away.
chip and sip. And what was it that they were worried about going before the hall with Pilate? Being unclean.
It's not funny. Sorry.
But, I mean, it is humorous. This is so ridiculous. But just as Jordan pointed out, this kind of stuff is going on all around us. Where our own brethren, members of the Lord's church, think that they can go throughout their week living in all kinds of impurity, wickedness, vile behavior. And, oh, well, Sunday's coming. Got to go over here. Go through this ceremony that's supposed to be a representation of our acknowledgement of sin and removing from sin and our being converted from the world, and now we're followers of Christ, and just has absolutely no effect.
But we're baptized.
Right, yeah. There's that avenue of grace.
Even Jason's been bringing that up about why he left, and then why he was disappointed in the Mormons.
Right.
Because they'd be out on Saturday drinking, but then Sunday it's holy day. It's like,
Right.
this is not consistent. So that's why even a denominational person, it's important for us to look the part.
Yep.
Or not only look it, but be it.
And then for anybody to try to say, well, you know, we're under the New Testament system and there's all this grace that is found for us. Listen, there's plenty of grace under the Old Testament system. And if God's grace did not cover these individuals and everything that they're doing while still trying to keep the ceremony and the ritual, did you get it?
I don't know.
Ugh. Hey, God is the same today, yesterday, forever. And if that is how he dealt with and viewed these people during that time frame, well, then the same thing is going to apply today. You cannot go through these rituals, through this ceremony, through worship and religion being like this. So here they are, busy putting an innocent man, not just an innocent man, but the Son of God to death. Now, to get timelines together for us, Mark 15:42, establishing our day as to when all of this is transpiring. Now when the even was come, because it was the preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath. Okay, this is Friday. And specifically with this, what's being talked about here is the getting of the body. They went and got the body, they're preparing it, and they're going to put it in the tomb. Matthew 27:57, when the even was come, there came a rich man of Arimathea named Joseph, who also himself was Jesus' disciple. Drop down to verse 57. When Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his own tomb, which he had hewn out in the rock, and he rolled a greater stone to the door of the sepulchre and departed. So he's been crucified on Friday. They're taking the body that same evening on Friday, Matthew 27:62. Now the next day that followed, the day of preparation, so here's the Sabbath, the chief priests and Pharisees came together unto Pilate, saying, Sir, we remember that deceiver said while he was yet alive, yet 3 days I will arise again. So the day that the Pharisees and chief priests come to Pilate making this desire to have a stone put in front of the tomb is actually taking place on the Sabbath. And then following these events, at the rising of the next day, which I believe the gospel accounts refer to it as the Lord's Day, or excuse me, the first day of the week, is when the tomb is empty. Now, lay all of that out because while I was in Virginia, I ended up having some conversations with some people. There's a group out there, and they call themselves Messianic Jews. So they want to go through a lot of the Jewish traditions, a lot of the Jewish practices, but they're doing that actually believing that Jesus is the Messiah. Well, pretty ridiculous for you to continue going through all these Jewish practices in the Old Testament when those are shadows and types of what Jesus is, and now we have that thing that's actually here, and everything the New Testament says you're not needing to do those things anymore. But, they were very much into keeping Passover and, this and that and whatever, and we got into a huge discussion over the timeline of events, and I can't remember now what their actual claim was as to how it all would have panned out. But in laying all of this out in its forms and fashions, with all the different gospel accounts, here's how you're able to work out an easy timeline with it. Then at the end of verse 15, they cried out, "Away with him, away with him, crucify him." Pilate saith unto them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." Now, just as we had mentioned a moment ago, preparation of the Passover. And these are all the things that you're involved in. And then we have a statement like this. And just the level of craziness continues to rise. We have no king but Caesar. They hated Caesar. Could not stand him. And Pilate knows that they hate Caesar. Luke 23, verse 12, Luke records for us how that the same day Pilate and Herod were made friends together. For before, and this is all dealing with the trial of Jesus, and before that, they were at enmity between themselves. But again, who can stand before envy? How far will evil and wickedness go? They will say anything to get their way. And then if you flip this around, just to show the huge inconsistency, part of the reason why they're so angry and upset with Jesus is because, well, we wanted a king that was going to overthrow Rome, that was going to deliver us and establish an earthly kingdom and build us up to the former glory that we had before under David and Solomon. If Jesus would have been what they wanted, physical deliverer from Rome, well, they would have followed him in a heartbeat. Oh, okay, you want to fight against the Romans? Yeah, we'll fight with you and we'll fight to the last man. But he was not that kind of king, so they claim they have only one king, and that is Caesar. And that was a true statement. They had rejected God from being their king, just like their ancestors did, all the way back in 1 Samuel chapter 8. And that's another example of how we need to be careful in our present moment about the decisions that we make. Because that decision made there back in 1 Samuel chapter 8, and wanting to have a king like all the other nations. And here are the Jews suffering still because of that decision. If they had never gone down that road, and if God had always been their one true king, they wouldn't be in this situation. And at this stage, from this point, Judaism is nothing but a political institution. There's nothing holy, nothing sacred, nothing sanctified about it. But then to bring our time to a close in application on this point, we need to ask ourselves this crucial question. Who is our king? Is Christ our king, God our king, or are we like the Jews in this situation that we have another? And we have a whole host within our brethren that they get squirrely. They start getting a bit flip-floppy when it comes to, well, you know, our government says A, B, C, and D. That's all well and good, but they don't have any charge over me. And especially when it comes to regards of matters of spirituality and morality. Am I to follow the government where I can? Yeah, absolutely. But at times and in the moments where they end up getting off track and start going into areas where they have no right to go, I have every responsibility to withstand and to revolt what government says. We have to ask ourselves, is God the ruler over our lives? If so, if yes, then listen and obey to his commands. In this, we have the danger of prejudice being shown and where that can end up leading. The danger of self-will, not being able to humble ourselves to the will of God, and especially the danger of self-will connected to religion. Because when we decide that we want religion to be what we want, instead of it being in accordance with what God's will is and what his desires are, then what we're being shown here, sin has no stopping place. There's no place where you can hold it back. And we can see that pictured in our modern time with the denominations around us. You read some of their older histories and it's like, okay, they're not that far from the truth. But in their departures and just how swiftly they've gotten farther and farther and farther away. And then you see that with our own brethren. As they allow worldliness, fleshliness, carnality to come in, and they're not upholding holiness, righteousness, as we should, and just, all right, there's no stopping place. You just continue to get further and further away. So we'll pick up in 16 where they are going to deliver him to be crucified. Pilate tries and tries and tries. There's no ground that he can gain, and so he finally gives in. And so we'll start picking up there with crucifixion and some peculiar events and important events that end up being recorded for us that are focused around that. So any comments or questions leading or through 6 through 15?
Pilate was removed 6 years later. Do you know what happened to him?
I don't.
And you're the teacher? No. You're a teacher. That's right.
Hey, you want to know? Dig it up. See what you can find.
Back when you say that God eventually is done talking to us or has nothing more to say, that correlates with pearl before swine
Yeah,
with us.
right.
That, okay, at some point even we don't need to keep going down this road.
Shaking the dust off your feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. There's that. Yes? And then Caesar Augustus was the Roman emperor at the time of Jesus' birth. Caesar Tiberius was Roman emperor during Jesus' ministry and crucifixion.
And
And
Nero,
then Nero was after.
Okay.
Nero would have been who Paul appealed to.
Yes, that's what it says.
Yeah.
The Google.
Okay. Well, since you did some digging on it, I'll see if I can find a chart to
That's what I was going to look.
put up for next time.
I
It's
have it.
AI.
I wrote
We're
it down.
trusting AI.
Oh yeah. Hey, our overlord. Yes.
I have it. I wrote it down.
Okay. All right. We will stop.